Good evening. Welcome to another session of the award-winning Austin Coffee House. I'm your host, Dave Arnsberger. For those of you who may not be familiar with our program, the Austin Coffee House takes people from Austin, Texas, a very unique town, chock full of unique people, and we come right smack dab in the middle of your living room and visit. Tonight we have one of those unique people here this evening, Joe Nick Patoski. Now, you may have heard Joe Nick's there. Hey, here he comes right now.
Hey, David.
Welcome to the Austin Coffee House.
Man, I smelled the beans fresh roasted, and heard some bongo music. I had to come on in.
Frijoles a la chara de caffeine.
¿Cómo está, frijoli Carlito? How you been, kid?
Been good, man. Muy frijoli. Now, you folks know Joe Nick Patoski most probably as the writer. Are you vice president now of Texas Monthly?
I'm a senior editor, which means
senior editor.
That's close to being furniture there. You know, if you can last longer than 5 years, you get some kind of title.
Right.
But I don't edit at all. I write.
Yeah.
And try to stay busy, look busy at least, and do my thing.
Right. And I guess probably the thing that your highest profile source of reference that the public might have would be, lately would be the Stevie Ray Vaughan book First,
which I co-authored
with
Bill Crawford. I like to give Bill credit. This was a team effort all the way.
Right. And then recently, the controversial biography of the Chicano singing star,
Selena.
Great Selena.
The book Como La Flor, asked for it by name and published by Little Brown.
How's the floor?
How's the floor? That's that's a loose translation if I ever heard of one. But that's this book racket is kind of I guess raised my profile a little bit.
Yeah. Well, let's back up then. Let's go back. I always like to solicit where you came from and why you came here. It's always an interesting place to start.
Well, I guess I stumbled in bass-ackwards here many years ago. I moved here in 1973, and I grew up in Fort Worth, which is a pretty soulful city to come from in Texas. But, way back in the early 70s, I got tired of getting my butt kicked all the time for having long hair, and so, like many other people like me, came down to Austin. I'd come down a bunch in late 60s and early 70s, high school and college, but I didn't come to stay till 73. And
did you go to TCU or something there in Fort Worth? Or?
I've been to, if you count night school, I figure I've been to 5 colleges. I started out at UT El Paso. I'd been accepted down here, but I went out to El Paso because I wanted to be on the ski patrol, and I didn't want to pay out-of-state tuition. So that was the closest thing.
The ski patrol.
Yeah, so I was into skiing at the time.
The ski patrol in El Paso.
Well, they do up in Rio Dosa at Sierra Blanca. Okay. They call that Ski Apache now. And as it turned out, I was getting so sideways. This was in 1969, and I didn't learn much in class, but I learned a heck of a lot outside of the ivy-covered walls, as it were, of UTEP. So I never got around to the ski patrol business, but I had a good time anyhow. I had a heck of a time, and from there I went on to the University of Minnesota.
What took you up there?
Well, I think it was because my sister had been going to school there, and I was just sick of El Paso, and I wanted out.
Where's that?
It's in Minneapolis, which is a fine place, I guess. It was a lot like Austin. I mean, it was pretty liberal and loose. But after taking a trip to Europe, I came back to El Paso because I didn't have a clue what I wanted to do. I went to UTEP for another semester, and then I got into radio. Yeah. And
I didn't realize that.
And I went back to Arlington between Dallas and Fort Worth and got a job for $1.60 an hour, I think it was, on KFAD FM. It was one of these old progressive country, not progressive country, but progressive rock stations. And you could play whatever you wanted. They had a huge library. You got paid minimum wage, but it was a great experience. And we, at that time, and you got to understand, in light of the times, we could get real wild on the air. And
Well, radio's fun when you can do what you want to do.
Well-
It's when you don't have the program director telling you everything you have to play, exactly what you have to say, and how you say it.
Exactly. It was a different ball of wax back then. In fact, I remember my program director, Phil Cook, didn't tell us what to play, but he did give us good advice. And probably the most humbling piece of advice was he would come in every now and then and say, Patoski, just remember, radio is the lowest form of show business there is. And I've held that close to my heart today. And even as I do a 1-minute sports segment on Mondays on KGSR, I keep that in the back of my mind. It's still a low form of show business, even to those that are in it. I'm sure they think highly of it, but
Well,
it's
the
a low
biggest
form.
aspiration if you're stuck in radio is to move up in the market size.
Yeah.
So you can move up in your salary.
I guess my curse was getting paid $1.60 an hour to work in Arlington, and I went to TCJC then, and finally I came down to Austin in '73 and went to night school at first, and then I went to day school.
At UT?
Yeah, and finally, I think it was the semester I finally made it into day school, and I was taking a class from Joe Krupa, experimental fiction. We were trying to plow through Ulysses, and I thought that was a big deal, and I tried for a couple semesters getting his class. But I was starting to write then, and I came down because I wanted to write about the music scene here. I thought there was something going on here, and it was real cool, and I wanted to hang out on the scene. And I remember I was doing some freelance, and I was driving cabs and working in a record store, Record Town in
That's
W
about
Hall.
the time I'd run into you here
Right.
and there.
And I think what got me to drop out of college was when the dispatcher for Yellow Checker Cab recognized me. One day I was sitting in a parking lot waiting for him to call, and at one point he said, "Number 32, is that your name there in Rolling Stone magazine?" And I was kind of welled up with pride, and I got back on the microphone. I said, "Yeah, you bet." And he said, "Well, what the hell are you doing driving cabs for?" And that part didn't stick with me because I kept driving cabs, but I did kind of get the idea, what the hell was I going to college for? I was doing what I wanted to do.
Yeah.
So I dropped out and did my graduate work at Soap Creek Saloon and places like that.
Right. Where I saw you all the time.
Yeah, I think that's where we first started running into each other
Frequently.
way
yeah.
back when, and I miss it because, you can get pretty loaded back then, but you always had the humbling experience of trying to make it down that dirt road.
Yeah, what we used to call it Crater Lane.
Well, and it was.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
there was nothing like when it would be so crowded, there were cars on both sides of the road, and you'd have to back up all the way out to get onto B Cave's Road.
What a great place.
And it's for all you people that don't remember or didn't have the opportunity to go to Soap Creek. It's right behind where a nice strip mall is over there.
Yeah, right out there. And
But,
Doug Somm used to live right behind it in a big 2-story house with a unbelievably beautiful view from his balcony.
$1 million view, and
Yeah.
that was a great place to hang out.
Yeah.
And of course, I did have the opportunity to go to Doug's house a few times, and
Yeah.
that was my entree into the.
Oh, it was so much fun. His kids, the Uranium Savages actually raised those kids. I mean, we'd play there 2 or 3 times a month. And we'd babysit the kids. He'd go, "Savages are playing. You guys get over there," And they'd come sit down in front of the stage all night. It was,
I remember he had hoops in the back of the house, and I remember him playing with his kids. And Doug used to cheat all the time, cheating with his own kids, but it was still pretty exciting to watch. This is one of my heroes, and here he is cheating on his kids.
Well, now, the dispatcher said, "Is that your name in Rolling Stone magazine?" Now, what did you do? Did you just start writing stuff and unsolicitedly, that's not a word, is it? And send in the...
Unsolicited? Over the transom?
Yeah.
Well...
or did you have a connection there? Or what's the...
I guess my
Chet Flippo, or...
Chet really did give me my break, because when I came down here, I was writing for anyone that I could. I'd sent in a couple unsolicited reviews to Cream Magazine, and Lester Bangs had really encouraged me, and that was one reason I wanted to move back. I was living up in Minneapolis again for the second time, and I wanted to come back. I was running a record store there, but I was homesick. And in fact, a piece I read by Chet about Soap Creek Saloon just made me want to come down here, and I said, I'm missing all the action. And I did, and I wrote for a bunch of real cruddy music magazines, Buddy magazine out of Dallas.
Buddy,
and, I worked for the Daily Texan and for a monthly magazine at UT called Pearl Magazine. And they let me write reviews, and they take these thematic pictures of me for the reviews. For instance, I did a thing on glue sniffing music and So I was dressed up sniffing glue and wrote about these records like Hawkwind and bands like Mahogany Rush as an example of the kind of bands that you listen to while you're high on glue. And that kind of got the attention of some folks like Richard West at Texas Monthly. And Chet was the stringer for Rolling Stone at the time, and he got the call to go open their New York office. This was about 73, 74. And because had been out there and writing a few things, he had recommended to the editors of Rolling Stone that they call me. And in fact, it was one night when Tim O'Connor fired off a gun at the Alliance Wagon Yard in a big crowd. And,
I remember that.
And one of the shots went into the video van outside that Leon Russell's CableVision was going to do some taping of shows in Austin. And I remember Ray Benson was in there mixing down some of his performance, and in comes a bullet. And somehow or another, Rolling Stone decided that was worthy of coverage. So I got on the phone. Of course, it was hard tracking Tim down in those days and getting a comment from him, given those surly...
it was not too safe either.
No, it wasn't. But it was... a way for me to get a byline in the magazine, and they kept calling, and I kept writing stuff for them.
So you became kind of the Austin reporter, Austin connection for...
Yeah, when things would happen here, I got to write about them, and it was a lot of fun at the time. I mean, I was really into the idea of Rolling Stone magazine and just writing about music, and bottom line is it was a great excuse to get into clubs for free.
Right,
and,
right.
That's,
you and Townsend Miller, huh?
Well, to me, it was like a kid in the candy shop. Not only would you get in for free, but some of the bar owners would, of course, want to befriend you and win your favor. So occasionally you got some free beers here and there and whatnot. And I was just doing exactly what I wanted to do, which was hang out on the music scene in Austin.
Right.
And it was a pretty great time back then. I mean, it was a lot different than what it is now.
Oh man, those were the days.
Well, we can look back and say that now. For the grace of God, am I not 6 feet under the ground? Because there were also some wild times. We didn't know the limitations that I think people are faced with today. It was just we could do whatever we wanted, and more often than not, we got away with it.
Right. There's other people that spoiled it for us.
Yeah, it was.
These people that can't hold their...
Well, that's just it. Is we would know our limits. We knew when to say when. It's just we very rarely said when. I mean, just keep it coming. And those were good times, but they're kind of behind me now. I'm older and more mature and probably a hell of a lot more boring. What can I say?
And then what was your lead in to Texas Monthly? I mean, obviously you had a good background and a reputation.
Yeah, I think it was meeting Richard West one night at Soap Creek Saloon, and Richard was one of the founding writers for the magazine, and he had seen my stuff in Pearl magazine and said, you ought to write for us. And
How long ago was that?
That started in 1975 is when I did my first article. I didn't
realize you'd been with them that long.
Yeah, I was on and off. I did popular music criticism for them all through the latter 70s, up until right around March of 1980. And then I was such a wise guy, thinking I knew so much about music, that I quit my job and I got into band management of all things, which was... I'm still not sure if it was a good or bad thing. It waylaid me for a few years. But
what bands were you managing?
Well, there was basically one, and that was Joe King Carrasco and the Crowns. Yeah. And that's because one night at Soap Creek Saloon, he was opening up for my hero, Doug Somm. And fans, I'm here to tell you it's not always the best thing to meet your heroes face-to-face. Let them be your heroes. Keep your distance. But anyhow, Joe King was opening up for... Sir Doug, and he announced a song called "Please, Mr. Sandman." He said this was written by Huey P. Moe, and I knew well enough.
Crazy Cajun.
And I knew well enough that Huey P. Moe had stole that song, or basically bought it from Jimmy Donnelly. He paid him $50 and put his name on it. So I yelled out, "No, he didn't. He didn't write that. It was Jimmy Donnelly." And out of that unsolicited blurting out, Joe and I became fast friends. We discovered that we shared the same interest in trashy San Antonio rock and roll singles from the 50s and early 60s. And I kept hanging out with him, and he would keep hanging out with me to the point that I got tired of giving him free advice. So I cast my lot with him after I went with the band to New York, and where Joe couldn't draw maybe 20 people here in Austin, somehow I'm sure I was instrumental or helped hype him to New York as this Tex-Mex punk act, and it went over great, and he had his 15 minutes in New York, and the rest was downhill.
Who'd ever thunk it? A little Jewish boy hanging out here in Austin, Texas makes it big as a Tex-Mex polka artist.
Yeah, and you know, well, I guess it goes to show the New Yorkers will buy anything, but they bought it
especially
full
if
tilt.
it's from Texas. Huh?
Absolutely, and I think a lot of that
Is he still active?
I saw him a couple weeks ago. He plays a little bit. He lives out towards Atlanta, and he's got all kinds of scams going.
Right, he always has.
And music is still a part of it, I guess.
Yeah.
But that was, to me, it was great fun. It was using a lot of my knowledge in how the press works, and especially the music press. And we got to travel coast to coast for a bunch of times for a 5-year period. Went over to Europe a few times. I married his organ player, and I'm still married to her, which was kind of an amazing thing when you think about it. And I stayed with that till 1985, and when the organ player got pregnant, she got off the road, and my interest started to wane. And
Pregnant with your child,
exactly.
Right? Okay.
And I kept my toe in the water for a little bit by managing a band called the True Believers, Alejandro Escovedo's band. And also, briefly, I tried to manage Dino Lee, who people now know as Mr. Wonderful or Mr. Fabulous.
Mr. Fabulous or something.
I think he settled down. I'm glad to report today. But he was too much for me to handle at the time. So anyhow...
Is he a trust fund kid or something? I wonder how he...
Well, you know...
He only performs every now and then. He's got the biggest band and the best musicians. He's always got all these outrageous costumes and things. I wonder, what else does this guy do?
I don't know, and that's a good question. I had met him when Joe first played the Whiskey A Go-Go in Los Angeles. The Whirlybirds, which were Robert Byrd and the Whirlybirds, that was Dino's name at the time, opened up for the band, and we became pretty good friends. I liked his music, and at one point convinced him to come and open some dates in Texas for Joe King. And he came out and played Dallas, Houston, and Austin in a big RV and ended up staying. And I'll take, if you like Dino, I'll take credit for bringing him here. If you don't like him, it was his own decision. He made up his own mind. So he came out here and stuck to it. But, you know, once my wife got pregnant, I started having to worry about a day job and you know, a gainful employ and all that. So I went back to Texas Monthly. I talked to Gregory Curtis, the editor, and he tried me out on a couple stories. I remember I did the 10 best swimming holes in Texas, which, being a Barton Springs swimmer, that was a real easy one to do. And then I did the 9 most challenging miniature golf holes in the state. And I guess he figured if I could write stuff like that and get away with it, I was worth hiring, and I've been there for 11 years now.
Yeah, since then.
Yeah, I mean it's a great job. I can't say enough about it, because as much traveling as I did with the bands, there's very few places I'd consider moving. Paris, Barcelona, maybe, but other than that, I'm real happy in Texas, and I could do this for the rest of my life. Just travel around Texas looking for stories.
Like drive-in movies. Are there any drive-in movies left in Texas besides La Misa?
Yes, there are.
I planned my whole vacation 2 years ago about coming back from Colorado so that I could stop in La Misa and
see
take my wife
movie.
to a drive-in who had never been to a drive-in.
Oh, she never been?
Never been. She's 11 years younger than I am.
Well, obviously deprived, and you need to introduce her to the experience.
Yeah.
Well, I'm sorry to say that I think it was called the I-45 drive-in complex in Houston, out towards Humble, is now gone. That was Gordon McClendon's last big group of properties. But
somebody said there's one south of San Antonio that's still operating.
I'm here to tell you that there was one that just opened within the last year between McAllen and Mission on US 83, Expressway 83 down in the Rio Grande Valley. So there's hope.
I've predicted that with the baby boomers coming of age, that drive-ins may make a rebound. Although
I need
it's
'em.
with the video thing, you know, but there's nothing like it.
Well-
the big screen, the open fresh air, you can talk, you can take your own food, your beer or whatever you want.
Whether you're a teenager that just wants to do some underage drinking,
Right.
or you're in heat and you want some privacy
Necking in the back
with
seat.
your girlfriend, or if you're parents and you just want to be able to drive your kids in so if they go to sleep, they can sleep in the back. Drive-in is really,
It's American.
it's an American, and it's something we all need and we don't have.
Right.
Now, I'm pleased to say I live outside of Wimberley now. I moved out.
They've got a little one.
Well, they got a sit-down,
Sit-down.
theater, the Corral, and
A walk-in.
every Friday and Saturday through Labor Day, you can go there and see movies, $2.50 admission, and the Cokes are 50 cents, and the popcorn's a little stale, but that's 50 cents too. And we go there quite a bit, but
Yeah.
it's not the same as
it's
a
not quite
drive-in.
the
I
same
want
as
to be
a
able to drive
drive-in.
my car in.
Drive your car in, pull out the lawn chairs and
Live a
chaise
little.
lounges, yeah.
But we need more of those, and I'm looking for those. In fact, you gave me a good story idea.
Lamesa.
I think I'm headed up there pretty
It's
soon.
a young couple that took it over. They make their own food there. It's fresh food. Excellent. Great driving.
None of this Act 3 stuff.
No,
right?
they have like some little thing they've actually created after like a chimichanga or something. They have a name for it, and it's got like cheese and jalapenos, but it's their own creation that they like. They won some award at some cook-off or something. They're real proud of it. It's got a real good feel to it.
I think there's a few more out in West Texas, up around the Panhandle,
Yeah.
but I can't think of them offhand. But
Well, let's get back to you here before we run
all
out
right,
of time. Now
enough about you. Let's
we've-
talk about me.
We've gotten through the Texas Monthly time, and here you are back at the Texas Monthly 11 years ago. So that, I suppose, gave you the opportunity to expand your writing horizons and go from writing short stories or articles
Yeah.
to expanding to the book.
Yeah.
Now, like I mentioned at the first of the show, the Stevie Ray Vaughan book, which most of you are probably familiar with, especially because you've probably been reading it's going to be made into a motion picture, right?
We hope.
Yeah.
It's been optioned by Miramax Films.
Yeah. Well, now, was that your first?
That was the first, and I'd actually tried back around 78 or 79. Rolling Stone magazine had started up a press, and they were going to publish books. And I did get a contract with them to write about Willie Nelson. And the press just never got off the ground. They kept talking about they're about to start. And I waited around. I tried for about six to 9 months, and they never got their act together. I think they finally did afterwards, but I folded that project and gave up on that. And I did contribute a chapter to the Rolling Stone Illustrated History of Rock and Roll when they published that a few years later. But no, I hadn't tried a book, and you know, it was real unfortunate when Stevie died in 1990. It was, it was a big tragedy, and people were talking about it. And Bill Crawford and I had discussed working together on a book project. In fact, we were going to do something on the Bass family up in Fort Worth, the billionaire family.
Right.
And Bill and I had collaborated on an article for Texas Monthly on Ed Bass.
That's an interesting family there.
Yeah, and they grew up on my side of town, so I knew a little bit about them. And it was kind of the same thing that prompted me to get involved with the Stevie Project, is that, this was kind of second nature. I was hanging out in the clubs in the 70s, and I knew him. I didn't know him real well, but I knew who he was, and I knew the scene. I loved hanging out in the blues clubs, especially Antone's when it was about.
Would you ever go to the one?
Oh yeah, I mean when you walked inside and
Stormy Monday.
I was wondering that's now where the Stubbs is, right?
Yeah.
And I wonder, is the vomit smell still there? And is that coffin there? Remember when you walked in and there was you walked into a coffin basically?
I don't think that's there, but I haven't been there, so I don't know.
Well,
I hate to say.
I need to go check out the pool table and see if that
Stubbs
guy
is gone, too.
with the service station patch that says Evan, he used to work there and hang out there. But it was easy to write about that scene to me, and it was something that I wanted to do at first, and then we sought permission. Bill and I did, or authorization. We went to Jimmy Vaughn and to Martha Vaughn, Stevie and Jimmy's mom, and Jimmy had another writer in mind to do the authorized version. And at that point, I kind of
At least you didn't have to deal with Mark Proct.
Well,
Oh, I'm sorry, I shouldn't say.
well, you know what? It was all through Mark, because I never did talk directly to Jimmy, and that kind of, I knew him. I thought at least I could talk to him, but it was all business.
Right.
And as it is, I backed off for a couple months, and Bill kept twisting my arm, and finally I thought, well, yeah, we can do this story whether we have anyone's blessing or not. And it was hard. I mean, some people that I thought were my friends wouldn't talk to me out of loyalty to Jimmy, but we got the book done. And
you got some stuff from me.
Well, I did, and it was amazing. It's kind of like the people closest to a person that's deceased like that. My observations are now they probably have more to protect about themselves rather than the deceased. And I discovered real quick the roadies know a hell of a lot more than the lead guitarist does. Right. And we put together a pretty good story. Yeah. And in fact, from what I've heard, that if the movie gets made by Robert Rodriguez, that Jimmy Vaughn's going to sign on as a producer. Yeah. I've heard, Mark Prock said so he can get all the facts straight, but it's kind of a left-handed compliment that we did a good enough job that someone's willing to pay us movie money, and that the person that didn't want to authorize it now wants to get involved.
Now, what about the Selena book?
Oh man,
has that been a nightmare or what?
Well, it's been hard.
Is it a father that's really been after you, or is it a whole group of people, or is it specifically her dad?
When I, again, like with the Vaughn book, I approached the family, and I told from the very beginning, when I wrote an article in Texas Monthly about her death, I told the father I was interested in doing a book because this is an incredible phenomenon. I knew enough about Tejano music and how it evolved, and I knew who Selena was, that I wanted to get involved in it. I wanted to know more, and I wanted to write more. And as it is, in the summer of '95, I went and visited him down in Corpus Christi. And there was a point when I wanted to get an interview, and he said, no, let's collaborate. He wanted to get a book deal. And I had a contract. I'd hustled up a contract. And the long and short of it is, in fact, I was willing to give up to put his name first, and he wasn't going to do any writing. He was just going to be a source. But I was willing to do that to get access to him because I knew he was, a very major influence. And as it is, when he wanted more than half of the royalties, I backed out because he's telling me, we can't talk about religion, we can't talk about this, and it was a matter of control. Yeah. And all my friends told me I was crazy to even talk with him because he is a control freak. And in the end, I wrote it on my own, and he said, if you write this, I'm going to go after you. And, he sent out faxes calling me a liar and all these things, doing slanderous things that if I was of a right mind, I would sue him, but I'm not going to do that.
Well, real quick, because the clock on the wall says we're running out real quick here. What's next? I mean, you still write for Texas Monthly. You did a thing with tornadoes. You went out and did Storm Chasers.
Yeah.
You just did a thing with sailing off Corpus Christi.
Yeah.
You got another book coming up? You waiting for somebody to die, or?
No, no more posthumous rock star books, I don't think. In fact, I'll go out of my way to do something else next time. But I'm looking at several book projects. And like I said, with Texas Monthly, I've got the greatest day job in the world. So it's just kind of like what's out there, what's happening. So anywhere in the state is fair game for me, and I'm going to go grab it.
Yeah. Well, great. Well, thanks for being our guest tonight, Joe.
Hey, well, look, I was really glad. I didn't realize the coffee house was open right now.
Oh, yeah, we're open every Saturday night at 10 o'clock.
Well, I'll come back by again, and I'll bring some of my own beans next time.
Yeah. Well, you might remember this guy. I don't know, Harley Berg.
Yeah.
He used to be up in Waco.
Yeah.
Well, he was one of my favorite guys I've ever seen on TV, and I close the show every week with the words of the immortal Harley Berg. Amigas y chiquitas, grosse und kleine Freundin, big and little friends, keep them running, flying, swimming, jumping, support your local writer, because he's your buddy. This is Dave Arnsberger saying happiness consists of living each day as if it were the first day of your marriage and the last day of your vacation. Adios, buckaroos.